Welcome back to Camp Conversations, the podcast where we share stories, tools, and strategies to support your resilience. This week, I am so excited for our guest, Emily Fisher, the owner of Ridgeline Physiotherapy, which is located here in Fernie. She has a perspective on resilience that I had never considered before. I recently saw her speak about brain health, primarily from a concussion perspective, and I had to learn more because so often when we treat people from a mental health perspective, it's so easy to overlook the holistic picture of events that have happened in their life that may also be leading to some of their symptoms. And Emily does this from a concussion perspective, looks at some of the symptoms that might show up in my practice as a clinical counselor and how they can be tied to past injuries or current injuries. So sit back, relax, and please learn alongside me. Thanks, Emily, again for joining us today. I'm really excited to continue a talk on resilience, but from your perspective, because we just finished our Empowering Women Symposium over the weekend, and Emily brought this great perspective of looking at resilience from brain health and from concussion history. And during her talk, as I was doing some of the concussion tests, I was like, oh man, I need to go and visit you in the clinic. So where I would love to begin, because I think our audience would really attach to some of the strategies and some of the stuff that you shared, because so often our conversations are looking at resilience from a mental health perspective and from a behavioral perspective. I just want to begin with your story of resilience, kind of what brought you into physiotherapy, what made you go down the concussion route, and just hear that.
Yeah. I originally kind of started being a physio. I did a lot of high performance sports. So I really knew I really loved the body. I really loved biology and human biology. And so my history is in outdoor education.
Me too.
Yeah. There's a few of us. So I used to basically do leadership development trips and expeditions up to 35 days plus, with whitewater canoeing and hiking and that sort of stuff. And whenever anyone got injured, I ended up being the person who was there, and I had a kinesiology degree, and but I always was just I don't know, I'm very overwhelmed, but really wanted to know how to help people, but just couldn't really help people to the extent that I wanted to. And people would sprain their ankles and get fractures or different stuff on trips, and so I was I just really want to help people better than I can. And I actually didn't want to be a physio when I became a physio.
Why?
I think I had experiences with chiropractors growing up, and but kind of from a physio perspective, not as much manipulations, but healing from injuries. And I just found it really boring being in their clinics, and I was this kind of sucks. It sucks doing the exercises. It sucks being in the clinic. It just was really not interested in any of it. And every single person around me wanted to be a physio, and I was I want to be anything but a physio. I really love program development. I really love project management, leadership, that kind of end of stuff. And at the time, I didn't really see that as what a physio did. Yeah. And so, yeah, anyways, I did a kinesiology placement. Spent 4 months in a physiotherapy clinic, doing kind of traditional physio, and realized that I actually can impact people at a pretty great level and change people's lives. And it was really cool to see what an impact they had. And I was basically working as a kin, and as a kin, you're under the supervision of a physio. So you have some knowledge, but really you're directed. And I liked doing it, but I was I'm going to be bored very quickly. I want to be in the later in the space, and I still I want to make decisions, and I don't I kind of am like a march to the beat of your own drum person. So I wasn't doing so well as being the person under somebody, but knew that I needed to get more education to be able to do that. So anyways, I went to physio school. We got 2 hours of concussion education in physio school. But my sister growing up had a concussion. She was 16, and I shared a room with her, and she unfortunately, she was on the parental ski team, was in the gym and ended up dropping a dumbbell on her head. And wasn't recognized as a concussion. And so she kept continuing to train until about a month later, where she basically fell off her bike, and they ended up taking her to the hospital, where she was finally diagnosed with a concussion. So she clearly was like exercise intolerance and different other stuff that was playing an issue in that. And so from that, the person basically told her to sit in a dark room. So she just sat in a dark room for 6 months, knitting hats and listening to audiobooks. And basically I was sharing a room with her, so I saw a lot of that process until finally she found a physio that she was able to start actually getting treated and looking at her like eyes and her inner ear. And I got to go to a few of those appointments with her and like see the kind of the cool things that she was starting to do and what an impact it made on her life. And she still deals with concussion symptoms today, but she like is fully functional and lives her life and has a family and has a great job. And so I've been able to see that impact. And so when I became a physio, kind of the opportunity presented itself to start learning about this space. And when I started taking courses and learning about it, I just became fascinated and kept learning, and taking a whole bunch of different courses, and it's pretty cool to be able to provide the level of concussion care in this community that it needs. So
it's really neat because I'm just connecting so much too. Sorry, my mom was a physio, and so I grew up in her clinic. Like, I was the one that washed the towels and then slowly moved up the ranks.
Totally.
And everyone was like, this is great, you're going to be a physio. And I'm like, no.
Absolutely not.
Last thing I want to do. And then with mental health too, I was like, no, don't want to touch it. And then did my undergrad, and I'm like, outdoor ed.
Totally.
I was leading trips.
Totally. Unfortunately, like, even that thing with outdoor is like, it's probably one of my very favorite jobs I've ever done. But it is not necessarily a sustainable career path for many reasons.
Yes.
If you want a family or a partner or financially, it just like isn't. It's a tough industry to be in, and so ended up being able to make an impact in a different way, and then be able to do personal trips. And we still do a lot of like expeditions and stuff, and so hence living in Fernie.
Totally, and like you, I've always felt that calling of when stuff went sideways, because it always does when you're on a trip, to be able to have all of the knowledge. And so it does kind of put you on this path of like, okay, well, what more can I know? What more can I know?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then when it comes to your own resilience, I guess, and working as a physio, I love talking to people that are in the capacity of like in a caregiving role, in a healthcare role, because you give so much. And like both of us were just like kind of relating. We're like, like we're always running from one space to the next space. Like it's hard when you're always giving to protect your own capacity. And yet I see you out doing all sorts of adventures. We met at like playing hockey, like. How do you keep your own cup full? How do you support your own resilience, and does it ever deplete?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely it depletes. It absolutely depletes. And I think is like probably my biggest challenge as someone who is a little neurospicy is so I would say my form of ADHD is hyperfixation, which so meaning that I can like, if I need to study or do something for like 12, 14 hours straight, I can do it. Like, put me in that box and I can keep going, which is like a massive, massive superpower to get a lot of things done. Most of the time. But every superpower is also your downfall. And I would say that comes with the aspect of like, I read a book and I've banned myself from reading for unless I'm basically on vacation for like fun, because I can read a book and then all of a sudden it's 5 a.m. and I have to see patients at 7. And I've gotten 2 hours of sleep and everything falls apart for the next week, minus me doing my patient appointments. Or like I can watch a TV show and it's all of a sudden I've got 2 hours of sleep. And so things can fall apart really fast if I'm not careful with certain things. And I would say that's my like biggest downfall and also my greatest strength.
So something you've had to like really learn how to manage.
And I feel like I'm continuing to learn how to manage. And like I'm definitely not perfect at it by any stretch of imagination. Like it is something I've had to continuously manage through my life, but at the same time, so like I recognize it's both of those sides. I'd say my husband, like having a support system around me has been super helpful. My husband is like does a lot for both of us. And like being able to like go to bed at the same time definitely pulls me out of like that, to be able to keep a habit, or like he's luckily a really great cook, and so he cooks food for us that's healthy, so I don't forget to eat. And I can put good food in my body. So like having him as a support system is incredible.
Like an accountability partner.
There's an accountability partner, for sure, which really helps. And I'd say the other thing that I really love doing, and this kind of comes from the outdoor side, is like my way that I disconnect is by being out of service. And so any chance that I have to be out of service for a weekend or take a week off and go on a trip, or like if I can be out of service, I can't fixate on anything to do with the business or any of my work. And so I'm completely off grid. So as much as possible, I'm like off completely. And if there's nothing you can do about it once you're out of service.
I think I just felt myself making a funny face. And I think it's because it's one of the things I really feel for the younger generations is that they've grown up without out of service time, and I'm the exact same. Like I think one of the greatest gifts of living in the Fernie area is that we have so many
10 minutes outside town, there's no service.
But actually my husband was in the back country this weekend, and Apple has changed. So now you can access satellite from anywhere and just send normal text messages. Where before we had to have our inReach, and that's so annoying to like you don't actually message on it unless you have to.
I've purposely kept myself off the Apple like sat phone. We have an inReach, and I just like, and especially in the backcountry, like you actually, to be safe, should have your phone on airplane mode, because it messes with the beacons otherwise. So you just put it on airplane mode and have your sat phone in your bag, and you're like, you might be in service, but you're out of service because you're forced to. And it's definitely my favorite way of disconnecting and having time away, and making sure that you're focused on deep conversations with people, and like actually connecting with other humans.
Totally. And I also relate to you on becoming very fixated on things. And I too, like I can't do Netflix like I wish I could, because I can't. I will even, mine goes to the extent of I'm thinking of the characters as if they're people in my life, and really wanting to know what happened so that I know that they're okay. And when it comes to books, I find I love reading and I need reading to wind down at night, but it has to be a book. So I get books that are broken into like mini stories, and those are the only things I can do in the evening is like mini stories, because I know I can finish it, and then I'm like, we're done.
I was like, any book that you can finish. I was like, I'm actually like, if I want to watch something at night, it's better if I watch a movie, even though it's 2 hours.
Because it has a close.
It has a close. There's no way you can keep going. Versus like, if an episode of TV is 1 hour, like even though theoretically it's smaller, the chance of me watching 6 of those is much higher, and then all of a sudden it being 6 hours than being a 2-hour movie. And so it's actually like way better to have something longer that has a final that doesn't keep like auto playing to the next thing.
It's nice to know that.
It's definitely a thing, but it's again like it's something to like I've come to terms with, because again, like it really is, I truly believe every single person's superpower is their downfall, and it like
your Achilles heel.
Exactly. And like if I suppress that superpower, then that would be massively impactful to me, despite like not having the downsides of that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a talk I have often now with young people, since I see young people so much, is that one thing I didn't understand as a young person, because I have always been this way, where if it's like if interest to me, I can study it and I can really understand the nuances of it, but if it's not, and I don't see the connection to the big world or a larger picture, I have a really hard time getting through material.
Yeah.
And I love telling young people that are still in high school or elementary, I'm like, never again in your life are you gonna have to just be average at everything. Like, if there's gonna be a time where you can really lean into those strengths. Yeah. And I'm like, just because you're catching yourselves really not doing well in one area and then not having the energy to go into the area you are interested in, I'm like, that it's okay. Because I loved university and graduate school.
Totally.
And I was like, I actually can learn. Like, there are all these.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
What I also want to ask you about, so you went into concussions, your sister had a background in concussions, and now that you are in concussion treatment, so I guess my own story is, if you see this side of my face, I had plastic surgery because I used to play varsity soccer and I got head to head and my whole side of my face split open.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a concussion then, and I was treated the same way as your sister. I spent a few months in a dark room. And since then, I've done nothing about it. I've been average. And then in our symposium, she does all these tests to see how you're doing. And I was like, I had my talk after my talk. And I was like, I'm actually nauseous right now. It's making me nauseous to do the eye and so I was curious, did you get a higher intake of patients than you expected to get? Do you get people like me that are like, hey, maybe I have something, and now that I hear you talking, there could be an area I need to explore?
I think it's an under-realized area, as I'll say. There's a lot of lack of awareness around it. We know that, evidence says 40% of adults will have concussions, right? So when you look at a room like that where there's whatever amount of people, that almost half of them probably have had concussions, and some of them, a lot of people just think of concussions as loss of consciousness. So lots of people are not even aware that they've had concussions, or where it can just be oh, it's
you said you just shake your head.
Yeah. So that's newer evidence that has come out, and I did a bunch of tests and videos and look at video analysis, and they basically it's called the shake, but it just a little bit of head shake, and depending on the sport, between 60 to 90% of, if you do that, it is highly correlated with a concussion, right? So it could be as simple as didn't really feel symptoms, but I did that, and you're like, that's a concussion. Or I felt like going to my bed, I got up a little bit more slowly, I had a headache after, I had dizziness for a minute or two. That's all signs of concussion, despite being really little. And so I find even 40% probably underreported, because lots of people don't report to the hospital.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't that surprised to see, when hands were going up, there's probably a solid third of the group there that had either some symptoms with it, or were really slow on tests.
People like me that stopped putting their hand up.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. So there was a solid third to half on some of the tests that people were having issues with it, and that doesn't surprise me at all, because most people who have concussions, some people get treatment, but the people who've actually had good evidence-based concussion care for each concussion is really low. When you look at the people who either didn't recognize they have a concussion, or they didn't access care, or they got to the doctor's okay, just go rest, you'll probably better take a week or two off work, right? So maybe they did access care but weren't directed in the right place, or they did actually go see a physio, but the physio wasn't actually trained in concussions, and so they treated their neck, and then they felt like they got concussion care, but they didn't actually look at their vision systems or vestibular systems, or how their neck integrates with their eyes and their inner ear. They didn't look at all the pieces of it, and they didn't do exercise tests, and they didn't do it takes me about 4 hours to do a full comprehensive concussion assessment. if you didn't do a multi-systems assessment and go through each of those, like that wasn't a comprehensive evidence-based concussion treatment. And so when you talk to people, like the people who've actually gone through all of that process is like very small. Very small.
Yeah, our coaches used to drive us. If one doctor said that we had to stay off for X amount of time, they'd drive us to another one to try and get us
brutal,
faster.
Right?
Yeah.
And like even the doctors, right? Like I look at people I have people come in all the time who are like, seeing the doctor cleared. I had a kid 2 weeks ago who was like, doctor cleared them for return to sport. They came to me before, basically they were already returned to sport when they came to me, but they're like, just want to double check. And then I did an assessment on them, was like, yeah, you're symptom free, but your inner ear is not working. Your balance is screwed up. You're like, you can't stabilize your gaze, right? So if you're thinking of being in hockey or like skiing or when they were a snowboarder, right? Like the chance of someone falling because their eyes and their inner ear and balance are all not working properly is really high. So that's pretty much exactly what happened. I was like, hey, you have the doctor cleared them for return to play. They returned to play. They were like, I was like, hey, I wouldn't recommend you be playing right now, but like, I also understand you've been already playing. So like, it's ultimately up to you. They went back to play. They did great on their first 2 games, took a hit on their third, or like fell on their third, back in for another concussion. And then that time I was like, no, we're not. Like, we're not going to sign off on this. And so then, and like, again, and the 3 weeks later, their balance all of a sudden resolved, their vestibular system came back, everything kind of just like got way better much faster. And I was like, okay, now we return to play. But the whole time, like they were symptomatic for 1 week after that second concussion. And I still had to wait another 2 or 3 weeks before their systems actually recovered to return them to sport.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking too, I mean, growing up, playing soccer, part of my position was to head the ball.
Yeah.
Over and over and like huge, long ball heads. And now I think my son really wants me to coach his team this year. And even doing my coaching training, I remember like we did all these little drills with heading, and I'm like, I don't think I could even do that with kids anymore. And I'm curious about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, soccer's an interesting one because like it's pretty clear, obviously, with like hockey, with there's a lot of hits. Unfortunately, people go down really fast. You hit boards, you hit people. As soon as hitting comes an issue, there's fighting. There's like it's pretty clear. Football is really clear. Boxing is really clear. Like rugby's really clear. Like all of those are quite heavy concussion sports. And like the evidence that's coming out around like CTE and that kind of stuff with those types of players is
CTE.
Basically it's long-term impacts from repeated concussions. So a lot of people who are having like repeated impacts and concussions in their brain, especially people who haven't been like they're not getting treated. So like your baseline gets here and then you kind of just like keep dropping rather than like getting that back up to high. It like keeps dropping, and then they basically, after you die, the only way you can tell if you have basically, it looks like dementia, like your brain essentially atrophies, is that they take your brain and they test it after you've died, and they look if you have had that, and then so anyways, when they look at hockey players and etc., they're like almost all of them, especially people who are playing professionally, like pretty much have CTE, which is awful. Less than soccer players, but there's still definitely like it's coming out that chronic or like repeated head again and again and again is like it's definitely happening in soccer players as well.
Yeah. Is there any like surprised you, or is there anything that since working with in the concussion area? Because I think one thing that really stood out for me was when I do an intake for mental health, we talk about the holistic picture, what their sport they're playing, like what they're doing in their everyday life, but that wasn't something I ever really thought about in my intake.
Brain injury.
Yeah, like have you ever?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that surprises me, and like I've worked in this space for a number of years now, and like continues to, like every single patient is a different story, right? And so the more like over time, I like did a bit of concussion, and now I would say like 80% of my caseload is concussion. So like I see a lot of concussions now, and that it can be not recognized because it can be like you think of concussion as being lightheaded, dizziness, headache, light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, exercise intolerance. Like there's some like pretty key ones that people have a bunch of them and they're like, you're like, yes, that was a concussion. But I think it's the people who've come in with one symptom where they're like, I'm really struggling with remembering names. That is like my balance is a little off and I'm like just really struggling, and it's like a big social thing for me because I can't remember anyone's names. Like I can't remember my friends' names, I can't remember, and so it's really awkward being in social situations. And you're like, they don't have headaches, they don't have dizziness, they don't have lightheadedness, they're just like struggling with short-term memory, right? And then like that person we like trained doing balance tasks while like going through A, B, C, D, E, when like I'm like name a name for each like thing, and we practiced like recalling out names and different categories and different stuff like that while we did, and then we worked a lot on balance and coordination, and like all of a sudden their balance was up, they could remember names, and then they're like, wow, I can be in a social situation again. And it's just like it seems like a minor thing, and most people are like, well, I don't want to get care because it's just a minor thing, there's people way worse than me. I'm like, no, that's impacting your social life, that's impacting so much.
I was gonna say those are the people that sit down in here and they're like, it's because I have social anxiety.
Exactly. So it's you're like these small little things that you're like, oh, I'm struggling with this, and you're like, that's still valid treatment, but also sometimes they end up in the wrong place. And so the example I was talking about at the symposium, and one that hit me pretty hard, was that like I had someone come in the last few years who was like, their main symptom was depression, and they had been seeing a counselor for 5 years, and like they had gotten a lot better with the counselor, but they just like still were having a lot of issues. And so eventually the counselor referred them to me, which is amazing. I love when that happens. And they're still seeing the counselor while they're seeing me because they need it. But anyways, we did an in-depth concussion assessment, and they had a concussion like 5 years prior, and we saw so many deficits through their vision, vestibular, and different neck and system symptoms, and we started treating them. And like 6 months later, they're like, my mental health, like it's not perfect, but like I used to feel like I wanted to kill myself every single day, and now I'm like, that doesn't happen anymore. And so all of a sudden, like their depression just drastically improved way more than it could have it had in the last 5 years. And like it's because their nervous system was on fire because their other systems weren't working and kept like giving alarm bells. So like no matter how much nervous system regulation, they just couldn't, like the hardware didn't work. It wasn't work. Like no matter how many updates you do on the brain or how many like it just won't work because the hardware is not working. And so when we got the like hardware actually working, it's not perfect, but all of a sudden they're like, their mental health was
I guess the piece you brought up too in the symposium that really resonated with me was the energy expenditure piece, and how, because that is part of a standard intake for us, is where you're sitting and the number of people that fill out apathetic. And then living in a town like this, we do have a high number of athletes or outdoor adventurers. And so I never thought to follow that apathetic question up with history of accident.
Totally.
But now that you even say the shaking the head piece, I was like, oh, like we don't even have to go to like history of trauma to your head.
No, I mean it's really clear. Like the test that I basically showed everyone is called the VOMS, which is vestibular ocular motor screening, plus like a few more, and it's one part of our concussion assessment, and it's like a really easy thing to do, and like literally anybody could do it. It's takes a few minutes, and we just go through like some basic vision vestibular stuff. And in that test, because we were just going with everyone, we weren't like, when I do it, I'm also looking at like, how are the eyes physically moving? How are they moving together? Like we're looking a lot more in depth of the function, but for the sake of doing it with that many people, we just kind of more were looking at like really basic big dysfunction as well as words at provoking symptoms, right?
Good. 2 questions to build off of that. First, tell me a little bit about the energy expenditure piece, like why that would lead to apathy and or however else. And then second, if I'm a person listening right now
what does that look like?
Yeah, like what are some things that I should be noticing about myself? Like what would kind of push me to be like, hey, yeah, maybe I am someone that needs to explore this.
Totally. So if we think of basically our vision and our inner ear vestibular system not working, every single time those systems should work automatically. Mm-hmm. They should take zero brain expenditure because energy expenditure because they just are automatic reflexes that happen behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. When they don't work, that takes brain energy. Every single time they don't work, your eyes, and you can think of this as like being on a screen for a long time, right? Like if you're like, it's not working, your eyes feel strainy, like, right? Like that should be simple to look at a screen, but it isn't, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think of your battery at 100% and every single time you use your eyes or your inner ear, it's dropping down, all of a sudden, like that can take a huge amount of brain energy, and that could drop from 100 to 80% or 100 to 90% or 100 to 50%. Like it totally depends on how dysfunctional those systems are. But a lot of time what we see in the concussion space is that people come in being like, my brain doesn't, like cognitively doesn't work, right? Or I'm really fatigued or whatever. And what actually ends up happening is we don't even treat cognition. Like as PTs, if there's a cognition issue, we send them to occupational therapy. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we actually delay, we don't send them right away to OTs. We only send them if their cognition's not improving post us working on every other system. Gotcha. Because usually what happens is once we deal with their inner ear and their neck and their eyes and how they all function together and all the other parts of the brain, their cognition improves.
It's not a cognitive delay or deficit.
No,
it's the lack of energy.
It's the lack of energy to put towards it because the other things are taking so much.
Same with the balance, right?
Same thing with the balance. Yeah, if you think of like it should be automatic, should be easy, but all of a sudden, if you're like, you know, your body's taking so much more effort to do that task, all of a sudden, your brain is just gonna be tired, right? And so. It's only like there can be cognitive issues, right? Like absolutely, but majority of the time, it's actually other issues that are leading to the lack of cognitive space to be able to do it. So when we were talking about like I'm having issues multitasking or with attention or concentration, like in concussions we see this all the time where people like almost get diagnosed with ADHD after a concussion. Like, did they develop that? Probably not. It's probably a lack of space leading to a lack of ability to control attention, and then all of a sudden now we have issues. Right?
And so you'd almost be in your head playing with, did I have a baseline before?
Yeah,
that is different than what
I'm experiencing. 100%. Yeah, exactly. So, it's really just like an interesting piece because a lot of people were like, "Oh, I'm really brain foggy," or "I'm really whatever," and you're like, "Okay." I mean, there's a million reasons you could be brain foggy. Your iron could be low, or you're like, your thyroid could be off, or whatever. But like, if you don't have a medical reason for that, and you're getting enough sleep, and your mental health is decent, like, why else might what else might be happening? Like, and this is a huge part that could be happening if it's like, and that hardware is just not functioning.
Totally, and recognizing, I think that, so like really as practitioners, all of us are siloed in our individual areas and in small towns like Fernie and even in some urban centers, like we don't have a lot of crossover. Totally. And so even with that example that you gave of that person sticking with counseling for that long and saying, I'm barely getting I'm not really making headway, and they've tried different approaches with it, then let's explore multiple options. And yes, explore the healthcare piece. Yes, explore the PT, even though it falls in there. Let's explore every single one. Totally. But I really like that because I feel like the Brene Brown stuff right now of looking at your battery every day, like she has a big piece like, look at your battery, and people will come into the counseling space and be like, hey, you know what, like I'm really running at a 12% right now, so I don't have a lot. And so now that I hear so many people tell me that, like with social interactions, like I used to be so social, and now every time I enter the social space, like it just takes me a half hour, and then I'm at like 30% in my battery, and I have to get out. And I think that would be another neat one to explore, like baseline. Like, what was your baseline before?
100%. And honestly, like, I think this is definitely not in like counselor training by any stretch of the imagination, but like asking one about the history of concussion or like brain injury, etc. Like, number one, absolutely should be ruled out.
Yes.
And if they got treatment for it subsequently, but and recognizing that, like, again, they don't have to have the symptoms of it. They could have had a brain injury, no treatment, and like symptomatically felt better, but still have dysfunction, and they just met their demand before, and so they were like, oh, I'm fine, I was meeting demand. But if all of a sudden you added new stress in their life, now they're not meeting demand, right? And they have issues. But also, like, they could literally do what we call, like, as we talked about before, like the VOMs with someone, and do it. It takes 5 minutes, and it's pretty clear, like, when you, as you said, with those tests, like, if that is causing you symptoms, like, you need to get that under control, or else, like, that is a major issue. Because that was like, those things, we did them like once or twice. Like, you think of doing that across the whole day, those should never, I don't know, most people's brain should not make you feel nauseous or dizzy or all those things.
And for anyone listening, right, it's not invasive.
No, I can describe like kind of the basics of it, but it's called the vestibular ocular motor scale, or motor screening. It's VOMS is the acronym, but basically it's a bunch of exercises where basically you can use your thumb and you move your eyes around in different ways and your head around in different ways. And it's just like a really, really basic screening test that takes 5 minutes. And again, should be, if you have no symptoms with it, it should take you 2 minutes. Cool. You should just run through it. But if it is symptomatic, then you kind of are like, okay, now I need to calm my brain down a little bit.
And now maybe I should talk to someone.
Maybe I should talk to somebody about it.
And is there places that people can find that, like online, or is it
honestly just Google?
Yeah,
like Google. If you put VOMS in Google, you will find it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy. It's like it's a very basic level test for PTs to use, and literally you can do it by yourself. And then again, like, as a practitioner, like, I 100% think that it could be screened. It's not in like a specific, you don't need a scope of practice necessarily to do it, because it's non-invasive. It's literally moving your eyes around a little bit.
And it just gives you insight. It's just like, obviously for counselors, it's not in our scope of practice, and go anywhere near like brain injury.
Totally.
But it's an important question for us to ask, because then it helps build the team. And I think that's where we're moving to in healthcare. It's like, we shouldn't ever be looking at a problem just from one perspective. It's always valuable to build out people on your team and get your problem looked at from multiple different professional perspectives.
100%. Yeah.
Anything that you feel like we've missed covering that would be helpful? I'm just thinking, our audience, you can write back if I'm wrong, but our audience is heavily professional females, many of whom have athletic backgrounds or are currently very athletic, and then many mothers that have very athletic children. And I think even listening to you talk, like, I had a part of a panic of my own health, and then I had a part like, oh gosh, my kids, like, what should I be, like, is there anything that you think would be helpful for our audience to hear or to touch on before?
Yeah, I think like everyone, just concussions in general, like, obviously we're talking a lot about like brain health and resiliency and optimizing brains, but I think everyone's going to be touched by concussion, whether it be themselves or the loved ones around them at some point in their life. And so having like some really quick basics can be really helpful in that time. So I think the main things are, one, improvement can happen anytime. Just because you had a concussion 20 years ago doesn't mean you can't get help. So you can access care at any time. Number two, we kind of talked about the type of care. Like, if you're going to see somebody who treats concussion, make sure that they're looking at your eyes, that they're balanced, they're doing an exercise test.
Is there a certain credential?
No, unfortunately, there's no credential. There's like kind of a bunch of different places that do. I would say there's like probably 3 or 4 main educators in Canada that do treat about concussion. Those programs could be a day, and they could be like the one I did. That's like 6 months long, right? So they can be super very in depth. So just because you've seen someone and you didn't have success, like, go try another person. They like, I see people all the time who've seen other people or seen many other people, and I'm the 15th person they've seen, right? Like, there's always someone with different knowledge who maybe got trained differently or more knowledge, right? And so, like, go access, just because one didn't work or one said you're better or one said, oh, you've reached your limit of success, like, go see other people, because there is lots of knowledge out there, but not everyone has it. The third is, we kind of talked about, like, symptom improvement does not necessarily mean that it's resolved. We actually want to see that it is resolved.
Yeah, and I like to use that word optimal.
Yeah.
Because we're not just trying to get...
Not just trying to meet demand, because as soon as your nervous system gets dysregulated by something else, kids, menopause, like whatever that is, all of a sudden you're going to drop below normal, and then we're going to start having issues. The other one is like, so that's kind of your persistent concussion. You're like, hey, maybe you thought we haven't had great care. How do we actually recognize and what to do? The other side is like the acute stage, which means basically you just had a concussion. What do I do? I think the biggest thing is PTs. PTs are usually like your case manager. They're the point person that is going to refer you into all the other things that you need, generally. So PTs are really great to see post-concussion. Physiotherapists, sorry. We typically want to see people within 3 to 7 days, max 10, is in an acute concussion. So a lot of time doctors will be like, concussion? Sorry, that it just happened. So like, you have the injury, when should we access care? And ideally it's in the first week. So a lot of the stuff around from doctors or like coming, etc. People are just like, okay, just wait and see if you still have symptoms in like 2 weeks or a month, then go get care. Like, I hear that. And unfortunately, like, absolutely we can treat them then, but there's things that we do if we treat it well within the first 2 weeks. The risk of persistent concussion reduces by half or more. So like, there's things that we need to get done, and like exercise program. We do a specific exercise program, cardio program, where we increase your heart rate within the first 2 weeks, reduces by half. Just that thing alone, right? And then on top of that, like, whether you are off screens or on screens, like if you're off screens in the first 48 hours, your symptoms take half the time to reduce. Right? So like, you really want to be off screens in those first few days. Your vision's dysfunctional, and all of a sudden you're like putting bright lights and
trying to hyper-focus.
It's like having a knee injury and being like, okay, do a bunch of squats. That's essentially what you're doing, right? You're like, no, your knee's inflamed, you need to rest it. And instead you're like, no, just keep skiing, keep ski touring, keep squatting, like, don't rest.
It's breaking, because when my son hit his head, I remember us being like, hey, just lay on the couch, we need some chill time. And he's like a very active little guy, and we're like, just watch a show and relax.
No, exactly. So we like want to be like, and the other thing is like, it's 48 hours rest. It used to be longer, and like actually we 48 hours off screens, no like full rest, that dark room, and then beyond that, it's actually worse for your brain to be resting. So like, you want to actually start
in the dark.
Did not help. They actually make you worse. And so like 48 hours rest, and then you like want to be, again, you don't have to going full out, but like little bits, tiny bit of increase is fine, of like cognitive activity, physical activity, like everything they normally do besides things that would risk hitting your head. So like, it basically, the people with the worst recovery are the people who do nothing, or the people who just like ignore their symptoms and go way too hard. Those are the people, but in the first 2 weeks especially, those play a massive role, and doing either of those can significantly prolong long-term recovery. So when we think of like these things that are in the first 2 weeks, if we can optimize those right away, the chance of long-term like recovery is quite high, versus if we don't, it's much more likely we will prolong recovery. So there's a bunch of things like this, but these are some of the basics. And so like the first day we see somebody, we don't even really assess them. Like, we talk about what happened, but we're like, bang, 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 do blank, 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 blank. Here's your roadmap for the next 2 weeks. And then it's only on the next day that we like really start diving into assessment, because they need that education immediately.
And so if you're listening and you hit your head, you don't get in those 3 to 7 days, because that's also a reality.
Totally.
Then what you're practicing is full rest, 48 hours.
Yeah. Full rest 48 hours. Then we use what's called the 2-point rule. 2-point rule is essentially the concept that, like, let's say your headache is a 2 out of 10 at the best point of the day.
Yeah.
So that's your baseline.
Okay.
You only want to go up to a 4.
Okay.
So 2 points above whatever your baseline is, to a max of about 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can stay within that 2-point rule, that means you like, okay, I did a little bit of screen time. And then, I hit my 4.
Yeah.
Okay, back to rest. Okay, it came back down to my baseline, whatever, 2. Okay, go for a walk. Great, hit my 4, back to rest, right? So we want to go in and out of that, but we want to stay relatively low.
Small wave.
Yeah, so small wave, exactly. So generally you're doing that after that. Of course, like, please go to your doctor as well. You don't need to see your doctor before we see physio, but we do need to see both.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the other, I'd say, and then aerobic activity right away. So you can start walking within 24 hours. Again, 2-point rule. Just if you can do the 2-point rule and go for 20 minutes of like somewhat physical activity, huge, and do that every day. Go harder as you can. Again, like reduces long-term concussion by 50%. So wow, huge. And then like breathwork, meditation, any sort of again, it's a nervous system injury. So all those things that we do to regulate the nervous system, good sleep, good diet, good, right? Like
all those things you don't want to do.
All things you don't want to do normally, like those.
Out Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. No Netflix. Like all those things, like we really want to optimize that. Breathwork is huge. It's one of the biggest things you can do to reduce your symptoms immediately. So all that kind of stuff. And then the last thing I'll say is like, there's a 10 to 14 kind of day of like, window of anyways, it's basically this window that's a scary window, and you really don't want to hit your head in that window. So if you are all concerned about having a concussion, like sometimes you don't know for days or weeks after, right? But if you're at all concerned, like do not return to any risky sport in the first 2 weeks. In that time, it's not like 1 concussion plus 1 concussion equals 2 concussions. It's like 1 concussion plus 2 concussions equals 10 concussions. Like it really can exponentially delay recovery. And on top of that, there's a small but definite likelihood it's that basically the brain is already swollen and it doesn't know how to deal with another impact, and it can swell uncontrollably. But basically, because your brain is encased in a hard shell of your skull, if you have too much pressure in your brain and your like body doesn't regulate that, then you can die. And so there's this like window that if you get a second impact in the first 2 weeks, that actually people pass away. And this is called Rowan's Law. Rowan was a rugby player. Basically, concussion was unrecognized, got returned to play a few days later, and then passed away. And so they've done a lot of advocacy around second impact syndrome, that's what that is called. But basically, like if you are all concerned that a concussion exists, do not return to play for 14 days.
Okay.
Those are kind of like the big things. There's more, but that's just the big things.
Like other people like me that are like, yeah. Well, I think with all of that, I bet there's going to be a lot of people listening that are like, okay, I need to talk to Emily, just like I did. And so, for everyone listening, we'll link Emily in the show notes below, and Ridgeline Physio, which is where they can get in contact with you or book an assessment. Anywhere else where they could find you, or...
Those are the best. We're on Instagram at ridgelinephysio.fernie. And then, on our website is the best place to book. And just for those, so we do telehealth across BC. So anyone in BC, as long as you're physically in BC, can access our care.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is definitely ideal to be in person, but we can, there's a lot of places where you just don't have the people in your community. And so telehealth is a great option for that. And then just there is physios, many of them who are amazing at what they do, but it's just asking the right questions as well.
And you do workshops and speaking events too.
Yes. And I love doing that. And we love chatting to different, or I specifically love presenting to groups, and so I love working with sporting groups as well as workplaces and community groups as a whole, and chatting about concussions and prevention and what to do when one happens and all that sort of stuff. And those are kind of general,
Which is amazing, because I think it's such an area that we just don't know enough about yet.
It's a cool presentation to do, because every single time I do it, people get those like shocked looks on their faces where they're like, what? Because it's, again, very different from what concussion care has changed drastically in the last 10 years. And so a lot of people don't realize how much it's changed. Like little things like, wake your kid up if they had a concussion every hour. Like, no, that's not the evidence anymore. We let them sleep. So like just things like that are like people just don't know, and it's really interesting to see it. And like I'm more than happy to connect with groups. You can always message info@ridgelinephysio.com, and happy to come chat to groups.
I highly recommend it.
It's pretty cool. And it's, I think, one of the interesting things doing this. So we've been presenting in Fernie for 3 years to paramedics and firefighters and nurses and doctors and like all the healthcare spectrum and coaches and just tons of people about it. Our community is becoming much more concussion literate. Like there's still a lot of people who don't know a lot, but our healthcare is becoming much better at identifying when to refer and what to do. And so it's getting better and better, and less stories of like people who didn't access care appropriately. But what I find is always really interesting is when someone hit their head like in a hockey tournament in a town, a few hours away. I forget how not concussion literate other places are. And then they'll go to the hospital or go to like other places and get information that's outdated, and then they come to me weeks and weeks later and they're like, they just told me to like sit and wait till it recovers. And I'm like, and I don't get that story that much in Fernie anymore, because we've done so much work educating the community, and it's really interesting when people come from other places and are like, I got told this, and you're like, no, that's not the evidence anymore. So anyways, it's an ongoing project, and I hope to.
If you know your organization or your sporting team or anything needs more education, then reach out to Emily. I highly recommend it. And thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you everyone for listening again.
Happy to be here.